if you guys are buying a property solely to rent out, you might want to consider doing this one thing. If done properly, it can save you thousands of pounds, guys, in the property market. And that's an understatement. Trust me.
You know what you're watching. DS Learning Finance. Whoa.
And it's basically buying a property as a company, people. Now, you might have heard of this before, but do you really understand why that is, though? Probably not. So I'm going to explain it using a whiteboard, guys. Oh gosh, who is this? It must be DSLF. Gosh, he's such a don. Be humble. Okay. First off, I'm going to explain what buying a property the normal way actually does to your portfolio. So Exhibit A, DSLF, yeah? That's me, guys, yeah. Your representative. But not just me, it's any other person in the world right now. So just treat it as a normal person. What does this mean to your portfolio? Well, simply put, let's do this. So when you have a job, yeah, J-O-B, and let's say a property, well, that's the same color, don't want to do that, I want to choose different colors now. Let's say a property, so, gosh, let's see how far my artistic skills can take me. Forgot the chimney as well, can you imagine? Okay, yeah, property. I think that's decent enough, yeah. As you can see, I've got a job over here, like a normal person, and I've also got a property over there, like a normal person too. So when the tax man comes, he or she won't look at this job separately, and separate from the property and that you're renting out. They won't look at it like that. So what they do instead is they do this. They look at it as a collective, guys. As a collective. So the money that this makes in total, that's the money that's subject to tax. Not the money that this makes individually, not the money that that makes individually, but the collective amount that is subject to tax, to income tax specifically. And you guys know how severe income tax can be. Just look at your payslip at the end of the month. Just to give you a bit of perspective, guys, in the UK there are 4 main tax brands when it comes to income tax specifically. So anything less than or up to 11.85k basically gets 0% tax. Anything between 11.85k up to 50k, so 11.85 to 50k, basically subject to 20% tax. The next bracket up is basically 50 to 150k, up to 40% tax. And finally the upper echelon big boy ballers like me one day, anything greater than 150k, so 150k plus gives a capped income tax of 45%, up to 45%. So it's a lot of tax, as you can see. After you spend all of your personal allowance, the most important thing here is to see how much income you are collectively getting from both of those. And just to give you a sort of idea of a realistic example, it might not just be that, it might be other stuff. Maybe you've invested in wine, maybe you've invested in stocks, all stuff in that mix. That's if you don't do it as a company. This is how the government sees it. So let's say you're just below this 40% tax bracket. So let's say you're on like 45k, yeah? You're on 45k just from your job income. Now having a property will probably push you over that tax bracket. It will probably push you into a 40% tax bracket. So therefore you need to make sure that obviously the amount of tax you're paying is now 40% collectively of what you earn from these two things. So you need to be more vigilant when it comes to that. But what's also important to note is that when you buy a property to rent out, you're not just buying one property to rent out, guys. Yeah. For me, I personally see myself like over my lifespan buying like 20 plus properties. And to be honest, this is an understatement when you think about it. A lot of people in the property market that are renting their properties out, they're going to buy multiple properties, which ultimately means multiple forms of income if you do it this way, guys. And if we're talking 20 plus properties, to be honest, if not really just 10 good properties to rent out, yeah, you could see yourself drifting more towards this higher tax band. So like the 40%, if not 45%, guys. You're going to be ridiculously taxed. Half of everything you get pretty much goes straight to the government. Can you imagine? Yeah, it's ludicrous. So you can see that buying a property this normal way isn't particularly favourable in the long term. Now, what does buying a property as a company actually do for you? How does it look like, guys? Well, to be honest, yeah, it's quite different when you think about it. It is quite different. But you're still subject to tax on that property when you're renting it out. Tax. But it is different from the normal way. So the first noticeably big difference that I will say is this: the government no longer sees this as one collective form of income. So I'm going to rub that out, guys. Instead, what it sees it as is how it should be seen, which is a job separate from a property. So your job is subject to income tax, but your property is no longer subject to income tax. Instead, what it's subject to is corporation tax, which is much friendlier form of tax. But it still is tax nonetheless. Darn you, tax. So you can see here, the company owns the property, no longer you. But what you are instead is a director of that company that owns that property. Yeah, there's a lot of, I know. But yeah, that's what you are instead. Indirectly, you are an owner when you think about it. But what buying it as a company does is it adds another barrier protecting you from that property. So as I've mentioned earlier, now your income tax is isolated towards your job and maybe other investments that you haven't put in a specific tax wrapper. Cool. So don't worry about that, because we all know what that is. Basically, pay slip at the end of each month. Cool. So now let's focus on the property. I talked about corporation tax. When you buy a property as a company and you're renting it out, you're subject to corporation tax. Well, what is corporation tax? In the UK, yeah, corporation tax is 20 to 25%. But the difference is here, guys. The lower tax band is basically up to £300,000 pure profit. That's a good threshold, guys. That's a good chunky tax band to fall within. But what I like about corporation tax is that there's a lot of room for your company, so your multiple properties. Let's adjust this now. So let's say 20 plus properties, your multiple properties, yeah, to grow without being undisturbed. So what does this all mean, guys? Well, simply put, I can only really explain that with an example. But the thing about this example is that it's just one example. Obviously, there are billions of people in the world right now. They each have their own scenario. So what I want to do is I'll talk about one specific case, and I want you guys to take that knowledge and apply it to your specific case, yeah? So let's say there's someone, well, DSLF, it's on 25k basically a year, yeah, just from the job. So you can see automatically in the UK, I'm basically subject to like 20% tax, yeah? That's cool. But now, also I have a property as well. I bought the property as a company. Now, a good sort of profit you can make on a good property is like £250. So that's basically £3,000 per year. So collectively, I have just shy of 30,000. I think it calculates as £28,000. So all of that is subject to 20% tax. Cool. So you can see the difference here between buying the property the normal way, i.e. basically when it's all subject to 20% tax, is gonna actually work out slightly cheaper compared to buying the property as a company, where just my job is subject to 20% tax and my company is subject to 20 to 25% tax. So corporation tax. So you can see that it's going to probably work out a bit cheaper just because that 5% range, that extra 5% range coming from the corporation tax. Cool. But when I start to progress in life, let's say I get a hefty salary increase, or I buy multiple properties, I can see this tipping board heavily siding towards basically setting up a company to buy properties with and rent them out. I can see it heavily siding towards that. It's only really towards the lower range of income where you can actually say that buying a property the normal way is beneficiary. But for most people, most working class people, they're going to be nicely above that threshold. But let's say you're on a nice salary, so like 48k for example, yeah, which is quite achievable if you progress in life and you do your job properly. It's quite achievable, but yet you have 10 plus houses, yeah. The normal way is going to put you on 40% tax, people. 40% tax. Whereas if you bought the properties as a company and rented them out, yeah, you would be subject to an average of 20% tax across the whole border. So 20% tax on your 48, 49k, whatever it was, income, and then basically 20% tax on your profit, on your profits coming from renting out those properties. So you can see that like buying a property as a company has a lot of benefits, specifically when it comes to tax. This is probably the main advantage when it comes to buying a property and renting it out as a company. But there are actually other advantages that will catch your eye, guys, and one of them is you're right there, guys. Lovely weather, isn't it? Oh, you want me to continue talking about the advantages? Well, truth be told, guys, this topic is a really, really long topic, but I've always wanted to talk about it. I'm enjoying this. So what I've decided to do is split this video into 2 parts. So obviously you've just watched the part 1. Stay tuned next week for part 2. Because as you can probably tell, I'm going to be talking about the advantages, the other advantages associated with buying a property as a company and renting it out. Because there are some other ones I'll catch you, I promise you. But also I'm going to talk about the nitty gritty, the stuff that people fail to mention that you have to do. Like you physically have to do it if you want to acquire this property as a company and rent it out. You need to talk about it. And to some degree, some people can even consider it a disadvantage at first, at the very least, to be honest. So stay tuned, guys, for next week's video, part 2 of this one, okay? And make sure you subscribe too. It's your favorite YouTuber, guys, Dami Solara. I talk about stock market investments, property investments, financial management too, giving you guys that consistent content, you know, before you guys can go about doing whatever you're going to do for the rest of the day. Say with me, like, subscribe and share, people. What? DS Learning Finance. Whoa. Bye, guys.
Whoa.
Ah!